Dr. King said, "True peace is not merely a distant goal, but a journey we walk with justice in every step." Our theme this month is justice. Last week, Reverend Marlin started the Justice League sermon series, discussing how in challenging times we humans seek inspiration wherever possible, even inventing our own imaginary heroes when needed. Today, however, we will discuss some real-life heroes. And luckily for us, history preserved the legacy of many of them. This week, our nation is celebrating one of the great American heroes, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who is no doubt the subject of countless sermons in pulpits across the nation. And many will commemorate his birth tomorrow with parades and celebration. So please note, due to inclement weather, the Tulsa parade has been postponed. So stay tuned for updates. Now, Dr. King's life is the epitome of the hero's journey. The hero's journey is a classic story arc, first conceptualized in the 1940s by Joseph Campbell, the late scholar of comparative religion. The hero's journey identifies the common threads running through ancient myths, sacred scriptures, novels, films, and legends throughout history. Every hero faces challenges, foes, and doubts, but in the end triumphs while undergoing positive transformation themselves. Most importantly, true heroism is defined by selfless actions for the benefit of others and not for the personal glory of the hero. Right. Tales as diverse as the Odyssey, King Arthur, the Lord of the Rings, and characters like Cinderella, Superman, and Simba, Hercules, Moses, and even Jesus all follow the hero's journey storyline. Whether real or fictional, these spirited tales teach us valuable life lessons, guiding entire generations through struggles and inspiring greatness. Heroes in these stories exemplify endurance, perseverance, and courage, showing that we too can overcome monumental challenges in our lives as well. Now, Dr. King was considered a hero because he faced adversity with an unwavering courage, sacrificing his life for the vision of equality and justice. He dared to confront racial and social inequality, poverty, militarism, and barriers to education and economic opportunity, particularly impacting people of color in our nation. Now, King was arrested and held behind bars on multiple occasions for simply peacefully resistance. There were countless threatening phone calls and hate letters targeting both him and his family. In 1956, during the Montgomery bus boycott, his home was firebombed. And he survived a near fatal stabbing in 1958. Now, somehow, with all the attacks and threats against him and his family, the FBI, trying to undermine his leadership and credibility, found it more necessary that he be investigated rather than the ones doing the harm to him. And even in spite of a haunting premonition of his own death, he yet pressed on. He famously said, quote, "Cowardice asked the question, is it safe? Conscience asked the question, is it right?" Mm-hmm. He noted, "The time is always right to do what's right." And while we're discussing heroes and heroism, we do so with the recognition that not every heroic act has been recorded in history, far from it. There are heroes not found in the history books or on the big stage. Those who do what is right at the right time. You may not carry an important sounding position or a hefty title, and your speeches may not be shared across the world, but we see you. We see your dedication, your passion, your love. We see you living your values. You are our everyday heroes, working in the background, collecting signatures, setting up chairs and tables, visiting the sick, donating to causes, serving on committees, building parade floats, attending vigils and protests, going to school board meetings, serving and caring for the community in so many different ways. I see Gary Allison diligently leading the green team, keeping us informed on how this community can do its part in saving the planet. Leanna Fish keeping the reproductive justice team active and engaged after Roe. Joe Nuri with our community resource bank, whose team just this past year gave away several tons of food to local organizations to feed some of Oklahoma's most vulnerable. Wayne Serba, Rick Gibbons with our refugee relief team, who are supporting immigrant refugees. And yet there are so many other everyday heroes. We see you. You are the ones who simply show up and do what needs to be done, say what needs to be said, move what needs to be moved, teach what needs to be taught. And we're so grateful that you do and for you. Indeed, heroes walk among us in our communities, workplace, and homes. Could be that precious grandmother who raised and cared for you when your parents could not. That favorite uncle who made you laugh, gave you advice and some money when you needed it. Your coach who believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself. That best friend who was there in one of the most difficult times of your life. That favorite school teacher who didn't give up on you, but who mentored you, who poured into you, helping you to become the person you are today. What makes them heroes? Simply the contributions they make in the lives of others. They help make our lives work. Now, my mother is one of my greatest heroes. I got some pictures of her. I know she's watching today. Hi, Mommy. There's her picture up there on the wall. Now, she's my hero because she is the embodiment of unconditional love and selflessness. A remarkable role model. She has shown great strength after losing 3 of her children, my brothers and sisters, 2 of them through violence. She sacrificed so much for us. And family is everything to her. Now, her language of love is through food, folks. She loves to cook for us. Now, Thanksgiving is her holiday of choice. And she does this. So that's 14 cakes. This past Thanksgiving, 14 cakes, 20 pies. That's 8 different meats, 11 vegetables, sides, and gumbo. Now, when my partner and I moved away 9 years ago, we would come back only Thanksgiving. That's the holiday she wanted us to come back on, because she would do that. Now, she starts a month in advance cooking pies and freezing them. And we'd come home, and there would be people in the house saying, "Hey, Mama and Grandma," and I didn't know who the hell these people were. But she opened her home to everybody. And they were looking at me like, "Who are you?" And I'm like, "That's my mama. This is my house. Where you come from?" So I wanted to tell you, by next Thanksgiving, you're all invited if you don't have nowhere to go. All right? Yeah. But as we celebrate Dr. King's legacy, we must also recognize and celebrate the heroes among us, especially those still with us. We honor them. Let us honor them today. In some ways, we are all on a hero's journey. Some are just more visible than others. Truly, it is our values that guide us in choosing who we aspire to be and in choosing who would motivate and inspire us on that journey. Now, I learned from Pastor David, who's walking out right there. He didn't know I was going to mention him. That if you really want to get to know someone, you ask them, "Who are your heroes?" If you want to know what values people hold, take a look at their heroes. For instance, we know from his writings and speeches that Dr. King was influenced by his Christian faith and the teachings of Jesus and drew inspiration from Mahatma Gandhi and his philosophy of nonviolent resistance and the writings of theologians like Reinhold Niebuhr. This is who Dr. King was influenced by. Now, Niebuhr, too, was influenced by Jesus and the Christian teachings, but he also was engaged in the works of Christian thinkers like Augustine and Thomas Aquinas. Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy was in turn influenced by his study of Hinduism and Jainism and the teachings of Jesus. He was inspired by writers like Leo Tolstoy and our very own Unitarian hero, transcendentalist Henry David Thoreau, who advocated for nonviolent resistance and published an essay on civil disobedience. Now, Thoreau was influenced by Eastern philosophies and by Ralph Waldo Emerson, with his belief in the divinity of the human soul. Now, Emerson was inspired by Plato and so on, and you get the point. When we look at human history, inspiring examples abound. But there's a continuity, if you notice, there's a continuity of ethics and values passed on to us by some of the great luminaries and histories and heroes of the past. A shining example of a courageous and selfless life lived 1,000 years ago may inspire to greatness someone who is living today. Your life too, with its challenges and victories, can become a shining example and a tale of the hero's journey. But not only do our heroes speak to our values and aspirations, they also promise to address our needs and fears. Now, former President Donald Trump is a hero to millions and millions of people in our nation and across the world. Perhaps because they believe that he will protect them and somehow make their lives better. Now, I do not presume to know who Donald Trump's heroes are. Now, I know that he doesn't seem to talk all that much about Jesus, but while apparently there are men around the world that he does admire, yet some of them may not possess the character traits of the heroes that I mentioned earlier, but he is a hero nonetheless. But still, some may wonder why Christians would choose Trump as their hero. All of us, including non-Christians, know the story and life of Jesus, how he advocated for the poor and marginalized, healed the sick, welcomed the stranger, loved his enemies, and turned the other cheek. And yet some Christians today do the very opposite. They openly refuse to help the poor, are against universal health care, are unwelcoming to the immigrant, and instead of turning the other cheek, they actually pick up guns. Echoing Mahatma Gandhi's sentiments, I don't recognize Christ in much of Christianity in this country. I said I don't recognize Christ in much of Christianity in this country, or understand how self-proclaimed Christians can endorse things that are diametrically opposed to what Jesus taught and exemplified. There are people in our nation who want us to go back to the days when women had to get back alley abortions, when gay men were arrested and beaten for daring to express themselves, back before civil rights, when black people knew their place, back to a time when anyone who wasn't white and Christian was deemed a second-class citizen. Now, some of the dragons that Dr. King had to battle on his hero's journey included the bigotry of many white Christians who were against school integration, desegregation, and public access for racial minorities. Now, the mainline church had overlooked the injustices of slavery and Jim Crow, and often indifferent to the bombings of black churches, lynchings, voter intimidation, police beatings and killings, and so on. So this cause for concern today because many in the churches today are still silent and indifferent, and we're seeing it, if not vocal proponents of discrimination and oppression. They appear to be more aligned with white supremacy and white nationalism than the teachings of a brown-skinned Palestinian Jew, a faith in whom they profess. Dr. King said, quote, he who passively accepts evil is as much involved in it as he who helps to perpetrate it. He who accepts evil without protesting against it is really cooperating with it, end quote. Although Dr. King dealt with presidents, police, and politicians, he saved his harshest criticism for the preachers in the church, both conservative and liberal, because of their inaction and silence on the critical moral issues of their day. And we're seeing that now, and I'm calling them out too. We may not be able to change the minds of everyone in our generation whose worldviews we find regressive or indifferent, but still we will push back against hatred, bigotry, and discrimination by lifting our voices against injustice while championing the cause of equity and equality, by consciously choosing love over fear. When faced with challenges or uncertainties, we will love and not fear. This is how heroes slay the dragons of bigotry, ignorance, greed, and division. Heroes are not born, folks. They are made through the choices they make, the values they uphold, and the actions they take. In her righteous indignation, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on that bus. Her defiance ignited the Montgomery bus boycott. In her grief, Emmett Till's mother insisted on leaving his casket open against the pressure not to, because she wanted the world to see what racism had done to her only child. Consider Nelson Mandela, who after his long imprisonment and mistreatment pursued reconciliation instead of revenge, becoming a global symbol of peace and forgiveness. Yes, we have heroes that have shown us the way. And this generation, like all the previous ones before it, has a unique opportunity to be our own heroes and to inspire and help future generations to become the heroes they need to be. And ours is not an isolated journey. My story is linked to your story, and our story is linked to the story of America and the world. We are all linked together in one garment of destiny. The hero's journey is a concept innate to being human. And even though none of us possess superpowers, none of us are powerless to do the things that need to be done. And if we let love be the guiding force on our journey, we will have the power to stand firm, to persevere, and to overcome. Our values demand that we do so. For love to be our guiding force, we must cultivate empathy. And sometimes by showing compassion to that neighbor who perhaps is not all that lovable, by attempting to understand why someone believes or feels the way they do, or by promoting justice and peaceful coexistence despite all the hell others are raising. The goal, folks, the one goal that's needed is a shift in human consciousness. That's our call. So as we celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Day, let us not only remember the hero he was, but also recognize the hero within each of us and the inspiration we offer to the next generation of heroes. Who are your heroes?